Peggy and I have been together 29 years. It's the greatest thing in my life is my marriage. I absolutely idolize Peggy, just adore her, and she's like second to me, second in my whole pantheon of the mythology of my heroes. She's second to the Beatles in my life, in my admiration. So that I am so blessed. I am so blessed with that. And then we have a 10-year-old daughter, Chloe, who's everything now, and a Wheaten Terrier dog who I'm insane about. So the family thing is great. That's one compartment of your life, though. You know the way President Clinton talked about compartmentalizing? You could be very happy in this department, and you're doing great in this department. And thank God you have your health. But then this department, you know, the fender is bent and the wheel's not turning on the car. One little thing on the car doesn't work, and the whole car doesn't go. So you have many compartments that all have to be running full blast for you to be fully in gear. And I never quite get that. Again, I'm complaining about something that sounds like, what's such a terrible problem? You know, yeah, compared to somebody in Haiti who's, you know, living in a ditch, it sounds pretty good.
How would you compare artistic freedom of expression, freedom of speech in the United States from 1960s and 1970s when you were coming of age to today?
That's a very tough question, because there's no ultimate answer to that. In the 1960s, the so-called underground, in which from the 50s the beat poets and underground theater and a lot of the stuff that my father was even doing, which would have been considered anti-establishment, slightly, he was sort of crossed both, his work crossed both, because he was popular success, but also considered countercultural and against the establishment. But he crossed both of those spheres somehow. I'm still working in the underground, what would have been considered the underground in the 60s, except there ain't no underground today. There is none to speak of. Maybe tiny little pockets here and there. In the 60s, the underground became the dominant force. What we thought of as underground music that was not on the radio for a few years, like Cream and Hendrix. Well, Cream and Hendrix kind of crossed over a little bit, but there was a definite counterculture underground against the music establishment, against AM radio. When Rolling Stone magazine started, hippies, that was the counterculture, and that became a powerful defining force of the era. There is nothing like that now. It is all establishment. It is corporate. It's a corporatocracy. America is a corporate country, corporate architecture, McMansions being built in people's neighborhoods, old buildings being knocked down for cheap clapboard homes and apartment buildings that are not even being rented out, where all the soul is ripped out of your culture, stuff you grew up with, that your grandparents grew up with. You don't see that in your life. You know, thank God, in downtown LA here, there's still a lot of old buildings and history along Broadway that's preserved, which is wonderful. But that's more unusual. The rest of the city is new, except for the studios and the old. All of our cities are destroyed that way. Dallas has been it's a catastrophe with what's been torn down and what they put up in its place. So in the 60s, freedom of speech was fighting a battle. Nudity, four-letter words. Lenny Bruce, off-Broadway, introducing nudity and obscenity. We now hear it on TV. All these quote breakthroughs, I don't know if they've made us a better world or not, but they were big cultural changes, women's liberation. And now all that is taken for granted, and yet with all of our free speech, where are we?
A mutual friend of ours, who I won't name on camera, said to me, Luke, all the things that we enjoyed doing that we did in college in the early 70s are now felonies, like date rape.
Oh, well, I think date rape should be a felony. Should have been then, they just didn't know it. You know that.
There's a hilarious line.
Well, ecstasy was legal, and you could buy it in a storefront 20 years ago.
All the speech codes on campus. Did you ever go to college?
No. No, I dropped out of high school. Then I went back and got my degree. But I went for a few months to NYU, and I dropped out.
When did you get your degree?
High school?
No, I thought college.
No, I never got to college. I never went to college, except I did go for a few months to NYU.
How has that affected you not having a college degree?
It's been a blessing because I wanted to work, and I got a job at Regent Sound Studios when I was 18 after high school. I wanted to work in the music industry to be a guitar player, and I got into one of the great recording studios in New York. Amazingly, I got a job as a microphone setup man that summer, and I loved my job so much I didn't want to go to NYU in the fall, but I went anyway and tried to keep them both going. And one of them it was too much, full-time job and college. One of those two had to go, and so I just said goodbye to college. I loved the job. I wanted to work.
So did you ever have a chip on your shoulder about not going to college?
No.
Did you ever notice discrimination or snooty attitudes
No.
towards you?
I probably can't teach ever in a university, which I hate academia. I loathe the whole mindset of academia. The halls of education is kind of sickening to me. The uppityness of it and the arrogance of it. On the other hand, now that I'm 54 and I see all these musicians who have college degrees who can't get jobs as musicians, they're teaching at some college or something and making a pretty penny, you know, and passing their knowledge on to kids, which is not a bad thing, you know. I mean, I could be very beneficial to 20-year-old kids with what I've learned in my life, either as a writer or a musician. I could probably teach better than an academic teacher. And yet I could never do that because you have to have a college degree in order to teach at a college. So that's the only regret about that. But I'm self-taught, man. You know, I learned how to write just by reading and doing it and doing it and doing it and struggling and struggling. And my father, always asking questions. Great teacher, and other writers, and for songwriting, Doc Pomus became was a mentor to me. He taught me how to write songs, and you can't really teach someone to write or how to write songs, but if you've got something, you can certainly hone that and learn a lot of tricks and the tools of the trade from a master. It's like being in Japan, if you want to be a samurai and you go to study with a great samurai, you know, there's a lot to be said for mentoring or for being, you know, the CEO's right-hand man or something. And that's why I always took George Bush seriously as president, even though he lives in my neighborhood. We have to, and even though he might be an idiot in many ways, I always thought, but his father was president, and he hung with his father through those years as some kind of assistant, and he was there during the campaigns. People don't realize what a powerful education that is. He knew something about being president because he was with his father when his father was president.
What differences does it make in real life, the different political orientations of people in New York compared to Dallas?
I think we're all Americans, and you really, you know, when I moved to Dallas, my friends in New York were appalled. They said, "You're going to get lynched down there." I said, "No, I got lynched in New York." Yeah, well, there's burrheads with crew cuts and shotguns, and you're going to get shot for being a Jew and all this stuff. Well, that was a total fantasy, and I have not encountered any anti-Semitism worth mentioning. I don't care if someone makes some comment about Jews in a bar or something. There were a couple of times where I heard Jew boy, you know, or something, but it was mostly it is not an issue. And neo-Nazis in Dallas, the punk guys who, you know, were doing swastikas on temples in Dallas, they get very stiff sentences. They don't tolerate that in Texas.